started
All
here,
right.
so we have to give them a wave. Okay, call to order Berlin Finance Committee meeting. Open session public meetings are subject to being recorded. Your image and voice will be recorded. So let's do the quick, the minutes. We still have to do the approve the minutes from the previous meeting, which was on what, the 16th?
We got the 16th and the 21st with the joint. So we got
Okay.
2 sets of minutes and I.
Yes, let's
got my
do the 16th. So we have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting on October 16th as presented.
Okay, we have a second. Anybody have any issues, concerns? All set? All right, roll call. Scott, aye.
Mary, aye.
Cliff, aye.
Heidi, aye.
All right, approved 4-0.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of October 21st as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a second, so any other discussion on that? All right, so roll call. Scott, aye.
Mary, aye.
Cliff, aye.
Heidi, aye.
All right, approved 4-0. Now, let's get to the main item of business.
The main event.
Yes,
Would you like me to just give a overview?
sure.
All right. So hopefully this won't take too long, and we can get you all out of here in not too much time.
Oh, from your lips to us here.
That's right. All right. Since it's an extra meeting, and thank you all, really appreciate having a little bit of extra time. So this memo is the draft sort of cover, as you may know, that goes with the budget packet. And it talks about kind of a general overview of what's going on in the economy and sort of the state of the town, if you will. So based on everything I know, which as you can tell is not a whole lot right now, based on our last meeting, I am recommending again a level spending budget with the exception of a 2% COLA for non-union, non-contractual employees. I believe that it's important to still do a COLA. That is the same amount that we did last year, or rather this year in FY25 for a COLA. Should we get further down the rabbit hole into local receipts and the recap sheet and see that our projected estimates are higher than anticipated, it's possible that we could revisit that COLA. But right now I don't feel comfortable recommending anything higher than a 2% at this time with the too many variables and unknowns. So as Mary had started to point out the last week, despite my organic milk that was $9 a gallon, the rate of inflation we experienced during the pandemic has slowed down. It's at an overall of 3.4% over the last 12 months, but it is compounded, as I was noting, with the high amounts that we've had over the past couple of years.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So we had an 8.7% increase in 22 and a 5.9% increase in 21, following nearly 9 decades of below 3.0 increases. So the 3.4 for this year is a little bit higher than last year. Last year was, the 3.4 and last year was 3.0. So just a little bit higher. Prices are slightly on the rise again. Not a huge.
Quick
Yeah.
question. Is this being shared so people can see?
Oh
it?
no, I can share it. Hold on a minute. Good call, thank you.
This is the online
Sometimes I
information, right,
forget to
Kristen?
share it. Yep, this is the one
Yeah.
that's in the drive. Share screen, window, budget, share. There we go. Okay. Can you see it now? Oh,
Yes, I can.
excellent. Okay, let me minimize that. So, an important indicator is to look at the last 2 months as well, in addition to the last 12, because that sort of indicates where we're headed now. And we're going up slightly, a little less than 1% over the past 2 months, ending in September of 24, following what was actually a 0.5% decline during June and July, I can't do math, during May and June. June and July, no, I had that right. June and July saw a 0.5% decline, and August and September actually saw a 0.7% increase. And that September upturn is attributed to prices for apparel, shelter, and food. But on a positive note, energy prices have gone down, largely due to the significant fall that we've been seeing in gas prices. So that is the general economic overview. Any questions on that section?
I thought it looked good.
Much?
Yeah, it's good.
All right. So we'll go on to the state of the town. Obviously, FY25 proved to be a very challenging budget year. We had to go above the traditional tax levy of 2.5%. In FY24, we raised taxes by approximately 4%, and it was approximately 5% in FY25 once we hashed out everything in June, after targeting a 2.5% increase for both years.
Did it still come at 4 or 5%? I had
It's
it at
5.
4 1/4.
It's 5. Yeah. I went back and June and I did the math today.
Yeah.
Even when you put the 116,000 in order to get to that remaining, is it 375 that we said? It actually had to go up 5.17, and it goes out like a whole bunch of digits. So that negotiated agreement that happened before town meeting, and I can share the budget sheet too if you want to look at that a little bit more. Why don't I get through this and then I'll share the budget sheet. But yeah, I went over it with June too because I obviously was running around before that part of the town meeting, and I wanted to make sure that I was looking at everything correctly.
But again, that is approximate.
And it is approximate.
Yeah.
So, because obviously we haven't done the recap sheet yet, so we have to look at where we're at with local receipts and new growth, which does seem to be coming in slightly lower than we estimated according to the assessor. So we're hoping we might have conservative estimates on local receipts that will make up for that approximate $50,000 that we are down in new growth. So, as you know, we were able to do 4 and 5% by by tapping into our excess levy capacity. And even with those larger increases, we did still utilize $116,000 in free cash to fund the Berlin-Boylston Regional School District budget, in addition to $181,385 in capital funds to the schools. So, so there's still a significant amount of funding going into that budget, and it impacts what's available for town capital and other one-time needs. So where we're at and where I can confidently speak on at this time, revenue projections do continue to trend positively. Motor vehicle excise, licenses and permits have been up, but we continue to be impacted, as you know, in FY25 through special education and commercial devaluation. And that is not appearing to change in any shape or form. The state hasn't made any significant reforms to special education that would help us other than those extraordinary relief funds that they provided, but that's one-time funding. So it remains to be seen if they'll do anything, significant in FY25 that would offset FY26. But as we've seen over the past few years, those special education costs continue to grow, and they're growing at a rate that outpaces the funding that the state provides. And that's where a lot of our gap has come from with regard to what we can fund the schools at and what the schools are, saying that they need in terms of that.
And that's not unique.
No, that's all across the state.
That's across the state.
It is. You're seeing.
I wouldn't want anyone to think it's unique
No.
to this school system. It's all school systems are dealing with this issue.
That's an extremely important point. And if you've kind of kept up with the newspapers over the spring, this past spring, there's been overrides and contentious battles between towns and schools, unfortunately, over resources. And I have seen how ugly things can get when it becomes a town school battle, because people had long memories in towns. And I'm hopeful, based on kind of a new start, that we started down Monday night, that we can build some more trust and move forward in a new direction, because continuing down this path, you build years of mistrust and distrust, and it ends up being the community that suffers, and I don't want to see that. So
Kristen, excuse me.
Yes.
Are you reading from something?
yes, on the Google Drive, the FY26 budget memo.
Budget memo draft.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm also sharing it on Zoom if you want to log into that too, if that's easier.
No, I'm tasked with minutes, so I'm not going to be looking at that.
Okay.
It's easy, better for me to look at the document.
I can also email it to you directly, Mary.
No,
if that's
you don't
helpful.
need to. I'm in it.
All right.
Uh,
So I looked at where we're at, even though we don't have the tax rate set. If we look at where we're at in terms of increase, raise, and appropriate, and estimated new growth for FY25 based off of the June town meeting, that is a little bit over $1 million increase in R&A over FY24. So when you put that into and here's the big caveat, estimate, when you put that into our property tax calculator of how does that impact on the residential side, it does look like we're running estimated between $650 and $700 a bill increase in FY25. So we will have a better number. It's possible that number is a little bit on the high side, but I would rather have folks prepared for that rather than, go low and have that be a shocker. So
And the emphasis there is on the average single.
average, which the average is around $635,000, I believe, if I remember the number correctly. It's somewhere between $630 and $650 per average single family home. So if you're in a condo, it's different. If you're in, a $2 million home, it's different. If you're in a home valued at $300,000, it's different. So that is the average single family home in Berlin.
That's an interesting number, because today I was reviewing the Massachusetts Association of Realtors September report on real estate activity, and in the county of Worcester, the average was $635,000.
You're kidding. That's really interesting.
To see that number twice in a day was like,
Yeah. Yeah, and I just looked that up
imagine
today to
it's
check.
much higher 6 miles that way. Do you know what I mean? It's just like,
Correct. And
Yeah.
I think, it's interesting to see what's driving home prices. I mean, you do, as we all know, typically have single family homes on larger lots here. A lot of them are older though. So you have a lot more, I would say, new construction or renovations in Metro West, and you are seeing some here too. You're starting to see those developments as some of the older homes get sold and they get replaced with the multi-million-dollar mansions. So.
well, I probably should be careful what I say, but I look at MLS every day. It's my job. And with the exception, I think, of one house, all the houses listed in Berlin are well over 1.2 million right now.
Wow. Very interesting. But somehow the average brings it down to 635. So
Yes.
that's,
Yeah. But that will probably change.
It sounds like it may. So, again, we're looking at, how do we balance providing the services that we need, and, strategically tapping into our levy capacity where we need it, while, not trying to hit the residents with really hard tax increases every year. And as we all know, that has been the balancing act of the century, right? Is finding where we're at. And it has been a challenge. And I'm really hoping that what seems like a perhaps different process that the school administration is taking on this year, which is they are starting from scratch with their budgeting. They're building it up, as the interim superintendent said. They're not just taking last year's and adding a percentage to it. They're really looking at each individual item. At least at a minimum, even if costs come in high, we should be able to have a better justification of and understanding of where those costs come from. And I've been assured that questions that we have will be answered, and we will be able to receive information that we need to be able to make those budgetary decisions, similar to what we get from the other town departments, because that's really how it should be. And that's not information that they need to bring to town meeting or even needs to be disseminated town-wide. But if you listen to DESI, we should, as the FinCom, as the select board, be privy to more detailed budget information and breakdown than the average person is, because we're analyzing the budgets and helping make those decisions and recommendations for town meeting. So as I mentioned, we will be going to the Personnel Committee on October 30th, and my recommendation would be the 2% COLA, and then the Select Board will take action on that recommendation on November 4th. I also did put in last year's memo that I was hoping to do a classification and compensation plan update. The Personnel Committee was not in favor of doing it this past year. I'm going to push for it again this year, and hopefully we can get that on a warrant as a special article, because now we're really 6 years out from updating our numbers, and they're supposed to be done every 3 to 5 years, plus things have changed drastically since FY20. So I think we really have to get those updates done. So with the exception of the FinCom message, if you skip down to the FY26 budget process, nothing has changed in terms of the instructions for departments, boards, and committees. They are to prepare the budgets exactly the same as last year. There are the same instructions and the same submission checklist attached here. So that leaves us with the FinCom message, unless anyone has questions on the rest of the memo.
I do.
Great.
So, I lost my thought. Give me 1 second. Level funding versus level service.
Different.
Different. And you've chosen level funding as the term you're using.
Level spending.
Level spending, all right?
Did I say
Level spending
Yes.
versus level service spending.
So that's a really good point. And I explain a little bit, if you go down into the third page, there are always what we call limited qualified exceptions
Yes.
for non-discretionary contractual, utility, assessment, debt service, minimum wage, health insurance cost increases, as well as any additional required staffing and market rate adjustments as recommended by the Personnel Committee. So what we're saying is it should be the same dollar amount as FY25 unless you have a quote or a email or something of that nature that shows that a specific cost is going to be increasing. And if that is the case, then we will have to obviously include that in the budget. So, and that is for, contracts that we need for software and non-discretionary items, because obviously we're not going to get rid of Vadar, which is our accounting software, because it's going up 7%. So there is an understanding and an expectation that things will go up. The term level spending has been used. I could certainly call it services too, if that's more amenable to the committee.
I struggle with the two terms because I dealt with it, when we were running school, when I was involved in budgeting for the schools, because there was a difference.
There is.
There is a difference. What's the term you're using? Level funding?
I think you
Level
said
spending.
funded.
Level spending. I'm
Level
coming up.
funded is what you.
Level funded, yeah. Because my concern with level services is you could say, well, we've had 500 new residents in town, so to provide the same level of service to everybody, I have to add 4 police officers.
Okay.
So that it's an avenue I feel to potentially add without justification, whereas with the level spending, I really want you to start at your FY25 allocated amount and try to fit within that to the extent that you can. If there are things that can go down because you didn't spend as much in that particular expense last year to offset things that are going up, the goal is to try to stay at that FY25 level whenever possible, rather than just adding on every little cost increase. I want the departments to look at where they could potentially reduce as well. And I'm not saying cut, but say you had $15,000 in your budget for, I don't know, pipes, and you realize you only spent 10 last year. Well, you can allocate that $5,000 to something else. And
Okay.
you're still trying to come up at the same number, ideally. Now, are there circumstances where that's not going to be possible? Absolutely, but I would really prefer to put folks through the exercise of trying to get them at or as close to that same number as we can.
Understood. Thanks.
You got it.
Appreciate that.
So there's some questions, or maybe you'll be getting into like with the budget numbers. So I just going by what you had mentioned last week. I know we already talked about the new growth. Our projections look like it'll be lower on it, because last year we projected 300. And I think that's where you said that doesn't look like it's going to come in at 300. You're at 250. In the other receipts you're kind of indicating look like more fainting level, but now you're indicating there is an increase. Or is there an increase overall, or what do you see on?
More what I'm looking at is really where we're at with our estimates. Our estimates for 25, and the fact that there was positive growth there. So, and those areas were motor vehicle excise licenses and permits. So that's really the only data that I have to pull from definitively right now. And that's why I'm kind of relying on that data, since I don't have this FY24 certified data.
Okay, but with the data that you do have, does it look like that is a trend that would offset that 50,000?
Potentially.
Potentially.
So if you look at what we estimated for motor vehicle receipts, for example, or motor vehicle excise in 23, it was $600,000. And I was actually able to bump that up to $695,000 because we had several years where that number topped $700,000. So I'm showing a general trend moving up in that direction. Same thing with the licenses and the permits. So I'm, counting on the fact that there'll be at least those levels that we're seeing the trend going up, and we're seeing it going up over a number of years. So they should be continuing to trend a bit higher. As collections continue to grow. The big drivers, especially of the motor vehicle excise, have been the two new developments in town, where you have Riverbridge and you have Highland Commons, and people coming in with multiple vehicles.
Right, bringing in all these new cars.
Correct. So that's been helpful too, to just bring our overall numbers up.
Yeah, because one of the things that's always made vehicle excise a little more volatile is the fact of if you get caught in a cycle where there's lots of people basically updating their cars, but then you get it that very quick depreciation that goes down to the lower amount after 5 years. You can
Right.
go where you're going up like this, and when it doesn't really level out, it's going to drop because of that depreciation that kicks in on the excise.
True, and it's hard to say with certainty. Those are two areas that over the past 3 to 5 years have been trending up every year. So those were two areas that I felt comfortable with saying there's a positive trend over time. Unfortunately, the other areas of the budget have been more volatile and more fluctuating.
Well, car values are certainly going up. If you walk into a car dealership,
It's
you're
true.
really aware.
Yeah.
Although I picked up a piece of business news that said that car companies are not selling at the rate they expected to sell at because people are balking at the cost of cars. So they're
Well,
holding,
everybody's
their older cars
everybody's
longer.
finding their breaking point, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
every
and
cars
product
are-
is finding.
That's what I heard generally, that the car
Cars are
companies.
being, I know a few owners of auto body and auto repair shops, fairly large businesses, and they can't take on any more business because people are holding on to their cars longer because they simply can't afford a new car.
Yeah.
So they're finding that they're doing the repair and holding on to their existing car is more feasible than jumping into a new car.
So we may see that tipping point and that downturn like you're talking about.
Yeah, it makes just a matter of, it makes a positive trend that the fact that new cars are coming in just because of people moving into town and just adding the car as opposed to the replacement. It's
Yep.
the replacement ones that end up being, if it's surging, going up because of replacement,
Right.
you will get that dip at a certain point. But if it's going up because of new vehicles being added, it's, obviously you don't know what those new vehicles are coming in, but on average you think it would be more steady.
Yeah. It's interesting because if you look at like Riverbridge, there's a fair amount of turnover down there, and people that come in there have some really nice cars. It's really interesting because you figure if you're paying over $3,200 a month for rent, I mean, that's more than my mortgage. Like I can't even imagine paying that in rent, but you're drawing that Boston crowd in, and you have a large number of units down there. So, I mean, one thing we can do, because I know we're really, shaky on local receipt, or not totally certain on local receipts right now, is I could certainly just stick to looking at, or add kind of a caveat in there that overall trends have been positive over the past 3 to 5 years, and make it a little bit less specific.
Okay. Reason I was asking the question, I mean, I gave my draft on the finance committee one,
yeah,
and I used the
that up
term
too.
of, well, you're looking at those numbers being level, and because of new growth slowing down, going level to decreasing, but yours indicated there's still growth, so obviously we need to adjust the finance committee one if that's not true that anything's decreasing, but it sounds like if anything, if things would be level, because it looks like if they can increase there to offset the new growth, we'd be pretty much just leveling out, right?
That's probably a fairer assessment, and I actually like the idea of talking about the new growth, and I see that in your memo, your draft that you have right here that you emailed out. So what I'm thinking is, let's put your sentence in here. A new challenge for FY25 is revenue projections are flattening out, even decreasing when it comes to new growth. And then just have it be, the budget continues to be impacted by rising special education costs and commercial devaluation. I think that's a more
And maybe one thing
confident
be-
way to go, if you will.
And the commercial devaluation technically doesn't impact the budget in the sense that all it is shifting that burden to the residential.
Well, it does in terms of what we have to pull for overlay to offset the abatements.
Okay.
So that's
maybe-
where it comes into play. So maybe we
Okay,
just need to word it.
mention that, that it's related to the abatement.
Yeah. Commercial devaluation, which impacts,
That's why I couldn't open it.
I'm trying to think, the overlay,
Well, it's more so, like you said, it's the shift of the burden, as well as covering the offset. But we've also got to take into consideration, we have a reval coming up too, which we're gonna have to put extra.
that's actually a really good point. We should
Overlay.
mention the reval in there too, because that started
Yes.
this year and going into 26. All right, let me make a note to mention the reval in there too. And there's gonna be a lot of adjustments, through that. All right. I will add in a sentence in there about adjustments due to the reval.
Scott, what format was your memo in?
Word.
I cannot for the life of me.
Here, do you want me to, can you see it now?
I've got it. I downloaded it. I just can't seem to.
Which one's sharing? Mine or? Hold on, let me stop
Kinda
sharing
lost
mine
where I
and I'll
am
share
with this.
Scott's.
I printed it if you wanted to.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
look at you. You rocked tonight
That'll
with the
save me from
printing.
going
So-
berserk.
Just so I understand where we are in the process, so Kristen wrote something, then you edited it, Scott? Is that
No,
what you're saying?
I wrote independent of hers.
We did it independently.
So there are two memos we're looking at.
Yes.
Yeah. And again, these are, suggestions. This is not a, what kills me is I think every time she moves, I think I'm hitting keyboard with a slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, by the end of the meeting, I'll finally have it down. It's like I'm thinking it's me. But yeah, this is, it's our memo and, it's like a committee thing. Here's a suggestion and we, obviously, everybody has their input and edit and.
So the comments are with respect to both memos, that we're going back and forth between the
Yes.
two. Yeah,
Well, first
that's
I-
why I'm confused.
Yeah, first I just did mine, and now I'm looking at yours and trying to
All right.
infiltrate his into mine, or integrate rather, not
Yeah.
infiltrate. Your memo is infiltrating mine. That sounds a little scary.
It's 8 o'clock, it's excusable.
I'm telling you, it's budget season, it's starting already. All right, any other changes or questions we wanna make to,
So I think, we need to adjust, where I put the statement and then now combining this with flat and decreasing revenues or however, on there, because it doesn't sound like we can say decreasing.
So
I'd say
Scott,
more
what
flat.
page you on?
It would be bottom of page 2, I think, because I'm not sure how it looks on the editing here.
Finance committee message.
Yeah, the finance committee
Okay.
message.
okay, let me switch over to that one, because what I did to make that one easier, Mary, I'm gonna confuse everybody again. I cut and paste
Yes, I saw that.
your finance committee memo into my memo.
So there was a little bit that was merged.
I'm sorry, I'm killing everybody. All right, so let me do this. Let me share this one again. So now I think we're relatively consolidated into
We have
one.
a concept of version control in document preparation.
Yes.
Sorry.
We didn't
Yeah.
coordinate well enough. I
Okay.
apologize.
We weren't
Yeah.
working off the same.
Version.
That-
Yeah,
well, we
I
did-
posted mine and like
well, we
20 minutes
needed-
later I got
They-
yours and I was like, oh,
They came in
shoot.
together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we needed like a document up there that we both edited.
A
at the
Google
same
Doc?
time. Well, we need, yeah.
Yeah, now there's an idea.
Well, we should have done a Google Doc. Next
Yeah.
year. Next year, we will. So when it comes to the FinCom message, what you have right now is the the Finance Committee has recommended above average levy increases over the past 2 years. The levy shift from commercial to residential in combination with levy increases of 4% or higher have increased the average residential tax bill by $1,200 to $1,400 since FY23. Now combining this with flat and decreasing revenues, it is more important than ever to take a very conservative approach to budgeting in FY26.
No argument. Okay, that's our message.
I guess the question is should decreasing still be on there?
Well, new growth is decreasing, so I
New growth
think
is-
you're
So maybe we
justified
adjust
there.
it and say flat revenue decreasing new growth. We probably should use the.
Add the words new
Yeah,
growth.
that's a good clarification. That's good.
And decreasing new growth. Okay.
I want to make it sound like Chicken Little, the sky is falling on every.
Oh, we like that. Then people budget really conservatively, and
And then nobody believes you when things change or whatever.
I know, that's true.
At first, I was like going, well, maybe we should just wait on this after a couple of weeks, because if you see the market is factoring in a Trump win right now, and they're all factoring in increased inflation and all these other things
And who
because of it.
knows?
So
I'm
maybe we
hoping
should
that
wait.
within a month or two, we have a better idea also, but it would
The
be
election
better-
could screw everything up though, too.
Yeah.
Either one way or the other,
Big
I
time.
don't know.
But as far
Yeah.
as for the budget goes, I mean, it would be better for us to come in low and have more supplemental requests and then be able, if it should
Correct.
come out that we do have additional funds, then we could look at that, but
And that's what I advised the department heads on when we met a few weeks ago or last week. I don't know when
Exactly.
it was. Recently, we met, and I said, don't hesitate to put in the supplemental funding requests. We want to know what those needs are, but just understand that at this point, it's unlikely that they'll be funded. But I do want to still know what they are.
Well, the supplemental funding requests go into to sort of a long-range planning about,
Correct.
right, we've asked you to wait for 2 years now, this is your year, right? So I think
Right.
I think that's helpful for employees, for people trying to get things done, to know that you're on dock, it's gonna come, and
Right.
that it's not a crazy idea, your request isn't crazy.
Right.
So, and the other thing I'd say is, we have a calendar, and we need to do things on the calendar, so we don't know what the election's gonna do. You can't live that way. We saw that with the school budget last year. Oh, we don't know what the state's doing. No, that's not valid.
True.
I mean, this is budgets are estimates, you do your best job, so
Yep.
here we are. And, you know, you can't know, and I think it is helpful, what we've got in the memo, to look at trends, to look at local trends and larger trends, and then you make your best guess.
Mhm.
On the local receipts and revenue side, there's one thing that's been bugging me a little bit, and I don't know whether a conversation could be had ahead in this, early in the budget cycle, but when my friend Phil from Hudson Disposal retired, and Jim McHugh out of Lancaster picked up, sent a solicitation out to the customers and picked up a lot of customers. Now, I used to have trash picked up, which is ridiculous because I don't generate much, but when that change happened, if you went with the McHugh hauling for your trash pickup, you were getting, you didn't require a sticker at the transfer station. You were now out of the system.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And I called McHugh and asked him about this, because I said I'd really like to still have that. And he said, well, I don't know where he tips his disposal stuff. I don't know where he goes to, but I think it would be helpful for the town to reach out to him about working a deal, bringing his customers back into our transfer station. It might not fit his business model, I don't know, but I think in terms of local receipts, it's something to I don't know
To
how many.
consider.
I don't know how many
It's not a local
households.
receipt.
I don't know
That
how.
isn't-
Comes in.
That's the revolving now. It used to be the offset
Oh,
receipts,
'cause we
now
put
it's the
everything in
revolving, so it
revolving.
doesn't affect the local
That's
receipt
right.
totals.
Okay, so
The
it's in a
only
revolving.
difference is that it's gonna be around, I think, like a $10,000 decrease for local receipts, because anything over and above what we appropriated and wasn't spent got turned back to the town, cause offset receipts close out at the end of the year, versus a revolving, it stays in the account and.
Right. And they
So-
requested Board of Health to have a revolving for the transfer station, which we started
this year,
July 1.
So,
Does that help with transfer station costs?
It does, because it allows them to have more flexibility in their budget, because that means if they take in money, they can spend it. So like if 15 mattresses come in, then they actually get the revenue from that, and then they have the money to dispose of them. Whereas if they just have a set budget and all of a sudden they get this massive amount of, drop-offs, they may not have enough money in their budget to pay for disposal for all of those things.
Well, it's probably, I don't know what the numbers are of people that went to the McHugh service, but MCHUGH. But, and I've mentioned it in passing to Stan, but I haven't pushed on it. But as I sit here and I listen to this conversation, I think we would help all of us to be thinking about those things.
Yep.
I'll make a note of it, but unfortunately, until we get all the year stuff in and just start the closing process, we're not really gonna know.
Yeah, and I don't know if Paul McKellar Stan might have a sense of how much the numbers changed.
I was just gonna say, Paul might be a
Hey,
good
I'll talk
person
to
to
him.
talk to.
Yeah. Or Sue.
Yeah, I'll see what he knows.
Yeah, I think he does more at the transfer station, but Sue does a lot of the numbers though.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he does more of the management of the
Sue
transfer
would
station.
definitely know, Paul maybe.
Yeah,
No, he might, but I
but
would
that's
say
a
Sue
good point,
usually
because she does
has.
the numbers.
Yeah.
Anything else we wanna add to the FinCom message or change?
I think it's pretty clear. Right,
I mean, the only other one I would normally, we've thought about touching, but we don't have any idea of the numbers, the free cash situation.
I know, I wish we weren't going in blind on the free cash and the local receipts. That would be very helpful, but I think it's best just to not touch it right now, because, I don't want to mislead or misaddress it in any way that's not going to end up being that way. And, you're right, when you can look at 3 to 5 year trends, but that doesn't mean that this year couldn't have a large drop off that's unanticipated. So it's It's really hard to say. So I think the best thing to do is just to leave that out this year, given the fact that we just don't have the numbers and the certainty to do it right now.
So are we doing that refunding on the free cash from our vote this summer?
We are.
So that's
on
on
December
that's coming
9th.
up for the warrant in
Yep.
December.
It's coming in a bit of a weird way, because this is how
Of
not
course.
weird, of course.
It's
Creative.
Well, I think
not a
it
normal-
it makes sense to us, but I was thinking of it in a way more complicated way than I should have. So maybe this won't be complicated to you guys at all. We are going to add $116,000 in public safety mitigation funding to the police department budget, and they will not use $116,000 in raise and appropriate that was allocated to that wages budget. And so that 116 will flow to free cash, which will offset the free cash that was given to the schools.
That way we prevented it from going on the levy.
Correct.
The drawback to that is the fact that the 116 free cash, we lose access to it for 1 year.
Right. Because then it has to go through the recertification process.
I mean, you get it saved. But
Yes.
if you really needed it, we don't have access to it.
Well, and knock on wood, fortunately, we have had decently healthy free cash. And we'll have to see where we land with that. But
So the 116,000 comes from Highland Commons mitigation.
Public safety.
public safety, which is Riverbridge, Highland Commons.
Indirectly,
Thank you.
because we're actually switching it so that it's a raise and appropriate.
Oh yeah, we're switching it around. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
It's a deft hand.
Yes. Well, and then that actually brings me to my point about the warrant for December 9th town meeting. Believe it or not, it is October 23rd. December 9th town meeting is about 6 weeks away. So we will have to add a FinCom meeting to review the warrant because there are financial articles on the warrant. So that date, if possible, would be November 5th because the select board will finalize the warrant on November 4th in terms of their review of the warrant. And if FinCom can do it on the 5th, then we can get it to the printer.
The 5th is election.
The 5th
day.
is election day.
Okay.
That
Can we
is-
do this? Can we do the 6th?
That is true. Or do we have you guys come to the select board meeting on the 4th and do it all then together?
I would rather do that. Yes, so.
Yeah.
That'd probably be the
Yeah.
best.
Although, you know what, the only problem with that is that I've already walked the select board through the draft warrant, so it might not be the best to explain the whole thing to them again, and you guys might have more specific financial questions than they had.
Well, you could get us the draft.
Well, I was just gonna
ahead of
say,
time and let us.
I have the draft. Now I'm gonna change this up again. It's 14 articles. It's not extensive. I
Okay, it
could-
is 14.
Yeah, I
Well,
could.
we reviewed it, or you gave us a quick rundown
Yeah.
back on the
It,
second.
it took me about, what would you say, June, 15 or 20 minutes to walk the board through
Yeah.
it the other night. Do you want to just do it now?
I'm
Because
okay with
A
that.
couple of them, I think we were
Yeah.
gonna bring through here instead of doing,
Yep.
so.
Yeah.
All right. If that you guys are amenable
Sure.
to that, because
Is it in the Google Drive?
I will put it in there right now. How's that?
That I did not print.
Nope. Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. Surprise. It's all right. We like to just throw a few curveballs in there every now and again to keep you guys on your toes.
I'm sure we can come up with some other things that are happening that week.
So I do have it in the drive for the select board. So let me just make a copy of it and bring it over to the budget.
So what is the thought on the meeting? Was it that we would still then cover this now and then we would then meet on
With
the
the
4th?
select board.
You wouldn't have to if, yeah, you wouldn't be able to vote. Or, we don't have it like for a vote on,
We're meeting on November 4.
So,
Yeah.
So the select board will be voting on it November 4th.
Yeah, right. So you guys, I think it might make sense to have you both review the final warrant together, because then you'll have had an overview tonight. They had an overview on Monday, and then you guys can look at the final one together on the 4th, if that works for you guys. And I'll just confirm that with the chair and make sure that's okay and get back to you on that. Let me make a note,
Sounds like a plan.
because if I don't make a note. So that's gonna be 10, oh, sorry, not 10, 11, gosh, I can't believe we're in November already, 11/4. So we do have 2 candidates that night, for 2 positions that will be there. So I think we'd be looking at 7 o'clock. Is that too early?
Next time for me on Mondays.
Yeah, 7's fine for me.
Okay, so let's pencil in 7 PM, and I will confirm with the chair and send an email,
7 PM on which day?
The 4th,
the 4th.
November 4th?
Monday.
Yep. I kind of like it when you guys review it together too, because that way, cross-questioning and more eyes on it all at the same time, and sometimes people ask things you hadn't thought of, and, it's a good thing to know. So.
Oh, I see it right there in the Google Drive.
Do you?
Oh, warrant. Is it for the right year?
I don't think so.
Were
Nope.
you attaching it to FY '26?
How do I make a copy?
Yeah, it wasn't
Make a
there.
copy. Oh, there, I made a copy. Okay, now I can move it. I'm gonna drop it right in the budget folder where everybody's.
In the 25 budget folder, FY 25.
Where would you, are y'all in the 26 right now? I mean, I could just drop it in there, or I can put it in 25. That's probably where it
I
belongs.
think it belongs in 25.
Yeah.
Can do that. I was just trying to make it easier. It
It's
does,
just clicking
it does
on a
belong in
different heading.
25. All right. Let me know if you can see it.
I kind of like that little noise sometimes it makes when you
The
send stuff.
swoosh.
Yeah.
So you know it went
Yeah.
through.
Can
Now
you,
there's 2 in there. Which one?
Can you share it when you? have a
I am
chance?
gonna, yep, absolutely. There's 2 in there?
Well,
There's
one
the
is-
old one.
One is from March,
Yeah, one's from last year.
and then there's one that just came in from 10/21.
It should say December, STM. And I'm gonna share it right now as well. All right.
Yep.
So, there are a couple of financial articles. If you scroll down to Article 1, we actually are able to not have to do motion 1A, so ignore that.
Okay.
We came up with an easier way to deal with that.
Okay.
So there will just be one motion, which will be the 116,000 that we just discussed from public safety to police department wages.
So 1A goes away.
1A is going away.
Okay.
Yep, we figured that we're okay, because we have the extra 116 in raise and appropriate in police. This was just a switcheroo because we didn't do the IMA for animal control because that fell through with Boxborough. So the money will fall to free cash from the animal control line item, and to try to explain that at town meeting is just going to confuse the heck out of everybody, but it's all gonna be a wash in the end because you're just moving it from one space to another. The animal control officer actually is supervised by the chief of police, so it makes sense for her wages and expenses to come out of the police department budget.
Which we're gonna wait and do in May, June,
Yep,
when we can make those internal transfers.
because
We're
we
gonna
have
request
enough
it.
right now because of the extra 116. So we don't actually have to do the switcheroo at town meeting. We can wait until May. And I think it'll just be less confusing. That's how the select board felt, that it would be less confusing for everybody. All right, so that's Article 1. Article 2 is our public safety second floor renovation project, really the reason that's driving this meeting. And I should have estimates within the next 7 days from the architect on the materials list, and that will enable me to plug in what that number is. So I don't have that number right now, but it will be the rest of the funding that we need, including the 15% fee to Assabet, and including the cost of the building materials for the project. The architect is at about 95% completion with the design right now, so we are getting really close to being able to start on the project, which is great.
Great.
And the ARPA funding is being used for the design and to purchase the initial portion of the materials. They have a little bit of the public safety stabilization money that came through town meeting. I believe it was $175,000 if I'm remembering correctly,
So,
and a little bit left over in ARPA after they pay for the design that they can put toward it as well. So we're just gonna figure out what the balance is, and I will have that for you by the 4th. Article 3, just so you know, capital is meeting to discuss this because it is a capital purchase as well, as is the public safety upstairs renovation. The chief is actually requesting to move his cruiser purchase that's normally on Maytown meeting to December because of the extensive delays and back orders that are going on right now. And literally departments are like fighting over vehicles and they're taking like 12 months to come in. So he's asking that he could have the money so he could put the order in now so he can have it for FY26 because it's going to take at least that long for it to come in. And of course the prices are, as you can see, escalating. It is now $75,000 for one hybrid Explorer. He did apply for some federal grant funding, and if that comes through, that will help offset this, but he doesn't know yet if that's going to come to fruition. So we have to put in right now for the full 75.
is that coming out of ARPA, or is that
Nope.
coming out of their public safety?
Public safety.
I know we do the hybrid, is the difference between the hybrid and non-hybrid increasing significantly during this time? I know
That's a
there's been
good
a
question.
emphasis of people doing hybrid, and
They are
hybrids
more.
are going up much more. Before, they were about the same.
Yeah.
Increase in cost was what they were about the same was the savings in fuel, so they were pretty much a wash.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious if they're
I'll
now
ask
gonna
the
be
chief.
costing us more money. I just curious for.
Yeah, I'll ask, because I asked him if he can go to capital, because another question came up Monday night about, well, why are we not buying electric? And part of it is because we don't have the charging
The
here.
infrastructure.
And Harvard, I believe it was, just bought their first electric police cruiser. It was about $90,000.
Yeah, it's,
So yes, we are a green community. Obviously, we want to move in that direction, but I think we also have to be fiscally responsible. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here. We need to wait till the costs come down a bit, and we don't necessarily want to be the first community to buy a electric police cruiser. And you know, as Tim Wysocki always says, and I do agree with, Berlin should not be the front runner. We should be following others' examples because of our size and budgetary constraints. It makes no sense for us to be the guinea pigs.
yeah.
We don't have the money to be the guinea pigs.
And we've actually been, it worked out well for us back when they, it was Crown Vics that they had before when they changed over, and Dodge was supposed to be the replacement, it was supposed to be the Charger. And the towns that used the Charger found out that their transmissions were not built for city driving. And by us not being the guinea pig, we saved from having going down the Charger route.
Right.
That other towns found was a maintenance, huge maintenance cost.
Exactly. And there have been electric police vehicles, but they couldn't handle the weight of all of the additional, what's the
The
word?
retrofitting that they have to do.
Thank you,
Yeah,
exactly.
they're already very heavy cars.
So apparently they've fixed that issue. So now communities are starting to get it, but let's let a few of them get it and see
Let
how
them-
well it goes. And then maybe also the cost will come down, because there is a rumor that Ford isn't making enough money on their Explorers, which is why the cost keeps going up, and that they may be canning those like they canned the Crown Vic. So I don't know what that means in terms of what do you do next, because so many people now have shifted to Tahoes that the Tahoes are on back order.
I did read that Ford is slowly trying to abandon their electric and hybrid. They're going back to full gasoline.
It's
Seems-
not panning out for
Seems
them.
like the wrong direction.
It
but-
does, but I guess cost-wise, it's not panning out for them.
People aren't buying them because of the cost. Right?
As
And
it
it's
was
just
projected
not-
that they would.
Yeah, it's not the time yet.
And the hybrid ones are restricted more in cost because they're on the state bid list. So they're not making as much money off of municipal hybrid vehicles as they would be off of the general public. So if the general public's not buying it, you know, and you're just getting a lower cost that you're selling to municipalities, they may actually
Well, the
be
hybrids
losing
are
some
actually
money.
what the general public is buying. That is the one that's going positive. That is positive.
Oh, it's the electric that
It's
is.
the hybrids, and that's why I was wondering too, is like, we are on the hybrids, are we also, you know, going down the road where we are paying a lot more because we're sticking on the hybrid road?
I see what you're saying. I thought you were saying that the hybrids were being phased out because they weren't making enough money off
No,
of them.
it's the
Because
full
that's
electric is
The
what's,
full
is
electric.
what
Okay.
they're slowing down on, because they're not selling them at the rate they expect. So
Okay.
they're going back and they're selling more gas only or hybrid.
okay. Because the rumor out there is phasing out of the Explorer for municipal vehicles. They are not making enough money off of them, even as they keep escalating the price every year.
Poor Ford. I feel so
I feel
sorry
very bad for them too.
Did we, were we successful in getting grant money for previous hybrid cruisers?
I don't know. It's a good question. I can find out.
I don't remember one,
You can apply, so you can apply for green vehicles through Green Communities, but we've mostly chosen to apply for building retrofit using that money. I don't know that we've used that, but there are other grant sources out there.
but yeah.
I'll find out.
I would think there are. I'm not an expert.
Yeah, I just don't know if we've ever tapped into it. I
I think it's worth
will
putting
find
a little
out.
effort on.
Agreed. All right, Article 4 is to transfer money out of energy stabilization funds for a part-time energy manager. This would be using the adder funds that come from the electricity aggregation that we have in town. So basically on everybody's electric bill, there's like a 1 cent or a 2 cent charge that comes back to the town. And that actually accumulates over time. And there's, I believe, I got to get an exact amount from you on that. I would be to tell you. The last time I saw a number, it was $80,000, and I believe it's gone up since then. So we had applied for a grant for $50,000 for this purpose, and unfortunately, we didn't get the grant. So Tim Wysocki and I had a conversation about, well, could we use the adder funds for it? And it is an eligible use. Adder funds cannot be used for buildings or construction or anything that's capital. They have to be used for people and services. So we could hire a consultant. And the idea is to help the town achieve climate leader status and have somebody who also is going to help us write grants to retrofit the buildings with energy efficiency upgrades as recommended in the facilities study that had an energy audit done as part of it too. So I think it's a worthwhile effort because Tim and I are trying to like piece and grab grants as we can, but we don't have the capacity to just keep applying for these grants. So to have somebody else who could help us, there's a lot of money out there right now for energy efficiency. And we just don't have the staffing resources to do it. And if this is a no cost to the town thing, because we already have those funds, and it could bring us a lot of money, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I think so too.
But it isn't a stabilization account, so that's why it requires town meeting to put it into a special revenue fund. Is it special revenue fund?
Special article.
Special article, I keep saying the wrong thing. It's the opioid money that has to go into a special revenue fund.
The earmark part of it has to come off, yes.
Okay, got it.
For the energy stabilization fund that we were talking about. So this would be to pay for that person's salary,
Yep,
and that fund keeps replenishing, that money keeps
It
coming into
does.
the town.
yep. And so the last time when we applied for the grant, National Grid gave and Colonial Power, who helps us manage that money, gave us an estimate that we bring in about $18,000 a year. And a lot of this work is front-loaded, so we could use a good chunk of that money to have somebody on board more in the beginning, get us like up to speed on all the policies we need, do a lot of grant writing, and then perhaps keep them on board, at a less hours for, 3 to 5 years until we get all our buildings. Well, not that we're gonna get them all situated, but see what we can get for money to get them where they need to be. Because this building alone needs a lot of energy efficient work on it. too. So, and obviously we're not getting rid of this building, so that would be not a great idea. Although, you know, if you guys have, you know, $40 or $50 million laying around to build a new one, let me know.
Let me check.
It's probably more than that. So that's Article 4. Article 5, the the state initially said put your opioid money that comes in from the opioid lawsuits, like the Purdue family, CVS, Teva, all of that, into a stabilization fund, and then they came out with more guidance that said no, you should put it in. Am I saying it right with special revenue fund on that one?
Yep.
So we actually have to revoke the town meeting acceptance of MGL Chapter 40, Section 5B, which allowed for us to put the money in the opioid stabilization fund automatically without having to appropriate it every single year, and move that money according to DOR's preference into a special revenue fund.
Yeah, because we had set it up originally that any money that comes in for opioids automatically goes into there. Now, they're saying that we have to retract that part of it, and we have to transfer, I think, because we've done it,
Mm-hmm.
the money from there into the special.
Got it. Okay,
We
that's
may
a
have to
better
do
way
the
to
transfer
explain it.
first, maybe before we revoke.
Okay.
That was one I had a note on.
I was gonna say,
had
yeah.
a chance to
Can you
look.
write the wording up on that one a little bit for me, so I
Yeah.
make sure I write that down correctly?
So what exactly is a special, special revenue fund? I mean, like, what's the difference here?
Stabilization fund requires different types of voting.
Yep.
And earmarking or designating where the funds are coming from.
Town meeting has to
versus-
vote. Yeah.
Yeah, usually all money is general fund money unless there's a special law or subchapter section.
Statute, whatever. yeah.
Statute that says you can keep money for something special. Otherwise, you have to have it as a general fund. But because the way that they reworded it, now the director of the DOR can actually just tell us that just put the money. If there's a special earmark fund coming into the town for a specific purpose, you can set it up as a special fund, where before it wasn't allowed,
Yeah.
and now it is.
Okay.
So it's sort of it's another option other than general fund or stabilization. The stabilization always requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting to take
Well, that's
anybody
what I
out.
was wondering too, is like, I know when I've heard stabilization, it always meant 2/3, I didn't know if that was in all cases.
And I don't know now, is this one here, I think, can be spent for the particular purpose
Without
going
town
to town
meeting vote.
meeting
That
to
was my
vote it out,
understanding.
I believe.
Yeah, so it makes life easier once we.
But it still can only
Fix
be
it.
used for X, Y, and Z, whatever it is
Right.
the funding source is
So
saying.
once it's moved into this revenue fund, it would be the select board that would make votes to spend.
Yep.
Okay.
And we haven't spent any opioid money yet. And we actually have brought in, believe it or not, over $50,000 in money from the I apparently need opioids. The opioid litigation. And one of the things we started talking about when we had a COA director is who was also doing social services. We started having these conversations with the Board of Health and with the police and fire departments, and then we lost our COA social services director, so that kind of fell off. But I think we actually have a decent amount of money for a small community that we might be able to do some localized programs that really could make a difference. And Chief McQuillan has some really great ideas that we're hoping to be able to implement. So once we get this all squared away, we can actually start moving a bit.
So, but this is not a sustainable revenue.
No, so
is-
this would be like for a short term, you know, we are getting it. Some of the agreements go up to 15 years, but they're like $1,000 or $1,100.
Yep.
A lot of them we got front loaded money up, you know, in the beginning.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I mean, I think there's even a couple that are a couple $100 originally.
right, or
Yeah.
some CADIS years 1 through 5 up front,
Yeah,
because yeah, like you
they
said,
were $300 or something.
and they
so
didn't
you
want to
had
send us a
$900.
wire for $300, so they sent us $1,500. But it adds up. There's so many lawsuits out there right now. Teva, Allergan,
I don't know.
CVS,
Okay,
Walgreens.
that's the picture I needed. It wasn't just one. It
No.
was, there's a repeat on
Many.
the suits, but each suit would have a finite amount of revenue coming.
Correct.
Yeah.
So these would be programs that educate the public or help people with opioid problems receive services.
Exactly. And there's a very specific, there's actually like a guidebook or a manual that lays out, like, I think it's 6 different categories of programs that you can choose from to do. So it's pretty well spelled out. And, you know, some of the, of course, Neshoba Board of Health wants our money. We actually have more right now than some other communities because we did get front-loaded from several of them. But we feel that we get a little lost in that big pool, and we'd like to do something more at the local level and have a fire and EMS director who is like up on this stuff and ready to put a program in place. So I'm excited about that we can actually like base it on his experience and what he's seeing out there when he's going to calls and like what people need. Because yeah, I mean, we could just like start handing out Narcan, but is that really like what we need here? So
You would really point it at EMS within.
that's where I'm
Chief
headed,
Williams.
because now we don't have a social services director.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
moving more towards COA, but he's got the background, experience, and ability to build that up.
So, I hesitate to touch this one, but are there any program projects that pointed at the schools that would potentially be a target for this kind of revenue?
Potentially. We're literally just starting those conversations, so
Yeah.
I think the schools are important to keep in mind as part of that discussion too.
Well, the non-ongoing nature of it, the one-time nature, sort of makes it. But you can
Educational.
offset a particular cost. It's kind of like what we do with CPA, right, or ARPA, just
Right.
offset the one.
One of the things we talked about is this educating family members on how to help people that are dealing with opioid addictions in terms of like knowing what to do, when to do things, you know, how to be supportive, how things that aren't good to do, and that there definitely are people struggling in the community with these issues, and that education piece. And there's a training program that trains people almost in like the mental health aspect of knowing how to help loved ones, friends and family that are dealing with this. So that's potentially a piece of it too, that one of the ideas we were kicking around. So that'll be interesting. The next one's pretty easy. It's amending the Recreation Revolving Fund bylaw to include wages as an eligible expense, so that we can pay the seasonal people. It's an important thing to be able to do. So, yeah, that's one little piece we need to add, because the current Recreation Revolving Fund bylaw does not allow wages or payroll as an eligible expense. So
Did we have a part-timer on this past summer? I can't remember.
we did, so we're gonna make
So
it
that was out of the
retro.
operating budget then, wasn't it? Not, because it wasn't out of the
ARPA.
revolving fund.
We ARPA was this past summer. We
Ah,
had a
okay,
seed
okay.
Money to see
program,
how it went, yeah.
but they're partnering with the schools now to
Yeah.
do these day programs. So
Now
what did we talk about doing if there was a slight overlap? I think they were starting in November, so there might be a slight overlap. Did we say that might need it?
we are currently, we're going to use the part-time wage line item that we do have.
Oh,
for the
within
director,
recreation.
But it's still a part-time, so if this didn't go through, we would have to ask for a reserve transfer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not a lot of money, because you're talking about a few half-day programs that they're working with the schools doing right now for professional development days, so that the parents don't have to pick the kids up at like noon. The schools asked the rec committee if they would put some programming together for the afternoons on those days. And you know, you've got per diem counselors essentially making $15 an hour, so you're not talking about, you're talking about pretty
Not
short
huge,
money.
yeah.
Yeah. The next one is not really financial, but amending the CPA-C bylaw to add a member of the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, which receives direct funding from CPA, in place of the now defunct Housing Partnership member. And the one after that, not financial either, adopting electronic voting bylaw, or actually amending rather, the existing bylaw to add electronic voting because we have it and it's not in our bylaws. Which we're still allowed to do, but we have to read off all that stuff at the beginning of town meeting. So this is supposedly going to eliminate us having to make the motion to waive the hand count and vote by the devices.
Got it.
So, Article 9 is an interesting one. So this is the adoption of MGL Chapter 203C, the Prudent Investor Act, which I may have hinted at a few times. So this is basically allowing for diversification of investments, because right now municipalities are only allowed to invest in very specific funds. There's a list. It's somewhat limited and infrequently updated. So 32 towns have already adopted this provision of Mass General Law, and our financial advisors are saying like 100 more plus are going to be going to it within the next year. And it allows you, it's still very specific. You can only invest in, I believe they're called like blue chip companies, like, you know, that aren't going to go under, that have that financial stability. But it really will allow us to bring in more interest on our money. So we like that generally. And it's still regulated, it's just diversified.
Yeah. Blue chips, like.
Is that the right
bowling.
word? Sorry,
GE.
You would pick those two.
Oh, I thought you said bowling. I was like, oh, whoops.
Bowling.
No, yeah, about bowling. Yeah.
Is it expanded to like mutual funds? Is it more mutual fund as opposed to any sort of active?
I don't know.
Equity
Our financial advisors with Bartholomew are going to send over some more information on that for me, but I'll find out.
Yeah, well, yeah, whatever they.
It's probably not going to be allowed to invest in anything remotely perceived as risky.
You can't invest in
I
the
would hope
Kristen
so.
Forsberg. Kristen Rubin, sorry, that was my maiden name came out. Wow, getting late. Kristen Rubin Fund, unfortunately. Yeah, nothing like that. I'm telling you. All right, Article 10 is coming off, so ignore Article 10. Article 11 is repurposing an old article that was to replace the roof at the fire station and to use that funding to demo the old fire station and the rescue building. I have to add that because that didn't make it into this first draft.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, Article 12, we don't want to get into a river bridge discussion tonight. And it's not financial, so let's leave it alone.
Rats.
I'm sorry, I just can't do it. You think I'm punchy now, it's only going to get worse. Article 13 is just a transfer of funding. We have an affordable housing donation account right now that's overseen by the planning board. That is money that developers paid in lieu of building affordable housing. And that money is, I guess, rightfully should be transferred to the Affordable Housing Trust, because they are now the ones who officially are in charge of affordable housing for the town. So that's that one. And then the last two are just transfers, or 14 and 15 are transfers of property that the Affordable Housing Trust is asking for. Legion Hall and a property on Allen Road that is somewhere between numbers 104 and 120, but they haven't actually been able to get the exact house number, so I'm going to put the parcel number in instead. And then the last one is a potential short-term borrowing because of our situation with the tax bills. That would require the only other way to do that would be a reserve fund transfer to pay for that interest. And it might actually be a better way than taking this to town meeting. So I did want to mention that to the FinCom to kind of chew on a little bit, because I don't know what exactly the interest would be on short-term borrowing. It depends on how much we have to look
And
at
how long.
and how long we would have to borrow it for. But that is on there for a placeholder. Can we do some research into that for the next meeting?
Yeah, it depends on how long
I know.
things take.
I know, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll have to flesh that one out a
Because
little bit
a
more.
long time ago, far, far away, we actually used to have, like, I think it was like $10,000 in the interest line item under the treasurer, just in case we needed to do tax anticipation notes.
And we don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
So we could, I mean, the reserve fund has 115 in it, and we've spent so far.
And this was definitely not anticipated.
This was not this was not anticipated. So I do believe it falls under an extraordinary unanticipated expense. So it would be eligible for the reserve fund. Because the other thing that's going to be hard is knowing within the next 2 weeks
Yeah.
how much money to put in this article. So we might have to do a reserve fund.
I'm trying to remember if it's going back a number of years, but don't we already do like, I mean, where you can do short-term from the stabilization?
We can do that
ourselves?
internally. It just has to go, I don't know if you can sign off on it as select board.
Probably select.
Usually it's
yeah.
like an agreement and it has to be repaid by June 30th. We can do that and that's what the hope is, but,
It's possible that'll be too big a number.
it
to
could be,
even
depending on the timing too, is because we also have.
Big school payment coming in.
The school payment coming in really quick, and we also have the materials.
For the upstairs.
Which we could borrow per se, but, I'm trying to think, there was something else too that was a big thing.
Oh, the chief had a grant. The fire chief has
Oh, couple of grants.
$55,000 grant or something,
Yeah.
or a couple of them that added
Yeah.
up to
Yeah,
over
so we've got a lot
$100,000.
of bigger expenses coming up, and if we don't see that, in the next month or two, we can get everything finalized for the recap sheet, we may run out of money to actually do the projects, and, so
That's a cautionary.
we're trying.
Item,
Trying
but-
as fast as we can to get through this. but-
Yeah. I don't know though that we are gonna have, now thinking about this a little bit more too, that we're gonna have an answer
By
for a
then.
warrant article in time to put a dollar amount attached to it. So it may, if we get to that point and we can't do internal, or we've exhausted internal.
But the other thing that was brought, we don't have any money to take it from right now, because we don't have free cash.
Right. But what about the reserve fund for the interest?
We could do the reserve fund, but that wouldn't be at town meeting. The only thing in
Right.
town meeting we would be able to take it from would be a free cash, and we don't have it.
Oh, so then it should come
So
off.
technically, yeah, unless you wanna hold open everything and do another raise and appropriate, but.
Do another town meeting? No. Okay, so by the way, June and I are having a complete side conversation here. I apologize. This
Sorry.
needs to come off the
No, it's
warrant.
fascinating.
You see how we work here?
Eventually, it will come to them though.
Correct.
Through a reserve fund. so.
Correct. This is literally hot off the press. We
Yeah.
just
Monday.
did this on Monday.
Yep.
So we're still kind of working out the details.
We're working on lots of weird stuff.
We're working on all kinds of weird stuff. And I can't pronounce the word opioid. See, I just did it. Okay, I feel better now. So just scratch 16. Never mind.
Here we go.
Okay.
But know that there is a possibility that we may need a reserve fund transfer for interest down the line, depending. But we would do internal first.
Yeah.
That's it.
Can people make voluntary property tax payments?
Contributions can be made to Kristen Rubin at 23 Linden Street.
You know what's really bad is no,
No.
No?
you cannot.
I
legally
actually did
collect.
not know that.
Yeah.
Not until we've issued the.
It has to be committed to the treasurer
Yeah.
to be able to accept the money.
Well, I'm glad I asked that question.
Well, I'm sure people are just lining up to pay those
Yeah.
tax bills they
Well,
haven't
I was
gotten
thinking,
yet.
I get my checkbook with me.
I was just gonna say, you can talk to your tax person to see if there is a way to do it without doing it, but I'm not gonna give you any tax advice on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No legal advice,
But
no
we
tax
cannot,
advice.
physically, we cannot collect any money
Okay.
until then.
That's Mass General Law, I presume.
So if by chance you are receiving checks for some reason for tax payment, you just hold on to it, or do you return them?
Technically, we would have to
We shouldn't
return it.
take them, yeah.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't know it's a check till you open the envelope.
So hold on to your money for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Oh, don't you worry.
I was gonna say, with the holidays
But don't
coming
think
up.
it's not gonna.
Don't think it's
That's
not
the
coming.
only
Yeah, that's the
thing.
tricky part, right? It's coming. Just not yet.
So I guess my other item, I don't know if anybody wants any questions or that from obviously Monday night's meeting with or the presentation we got from the schools. Is there anybody have questions or comments or anything on that, or if you had time to
Well,
hear what they've had to say?
Sure, Madam Chairperson wouldn't let me ask another question. So I'll put it on the
So
table
she's gonna ask
here.
it now.
I'll put it on the table here, which is, I'm curious.
This is your payback for doing the minutes. Yeah, you asked this question.
Oh, no, you're not done.
That's your
with this.
compensation.
You are not done. This is my third set of minutes. You're not done.
Just trying to make that easy over here, jeez.
I don't think it's a frivolous question, actually. Is there value to some forensic look at that financial software that's sitting over there in the district office and what happened this year and maybe over 2 years? Because this is weird, to pick a word out of the ether. Certainly in my experience, it's don't pay any bills from June. I mean, all of it is just quite odd, and I'm curious whether people that shouldn't have been in the system were in the system, and where things got moved, if they got moved. So you understand why I'm saying the word forensic look at it, because I believe, the Dan Deedy and Al Ganem, I have no doubt that they're giving us a straight story. They didn't see any problems, they didn't see any malfeasance, that kind of thing, but you can't see the things that a forensic audit can see when you're in there as a financial, I don't think you can anyway. So, that's about the electronic systems and what's been going on with them. So that question was running through my head, and it wasn't the right context, I think, to ask it. But Scott, you're opening it up, so that's the one thing that I came away from that I'm still curious about, whether that's something that's useful, and I don't know if people at DESE or DOR would think the way I'm thinking.
I was just gonna say, if you want my 2 cents, with DESE involved, if something doesn't pass the sniff test, the opinion that the sense that I got from speaking to Jay Sullivan is that they will, take any and all measures necessary to get the answers that they need. I mean, they obviously, as DESE, have gone as far as to put districts in receivership before, as we all know. So, and I'm not alluding to the fact that would happen here, but I'm saying they have a lot of power and authority, and I feel like if they get concerned at that level, there are many steps that they can take to intervene and require those types of actions. So
maybe a little bit like we are, we're putting out fires. It's really hard to think about anything else but the fire that's on the table, and that's what they're doing. But I would think with the new permanent finance person coming in, if I were in his shoes, I'd be kind of nervous about what is it I'm getting here, right? And if that service were available, I think I'd want it.
Well,
maybe I'm just suspicious, but
they haven't had their audit
Right.
of the last fiscal year yet.
No.
okay, so that's a good first step, isn't it?
That's good,
Yeah.
because, and he said that, he said,
Yeah.
we haven't had an audit of that yet. He didn't say why, but typically this is the time of year when the audit happens.
it starts.
And so there will be an outside person or people or agency who will go through the books. And I know every year, it was my experience that after the audit, we would get a memo of corrections, changes,
Suggestion, the whole,
slap on the wrist for doing this when you should have done that.
Findings.
It would be, that's right. It was a whole list
Findings
of
and
findings.
recommendations. Yeah.
And then
That's the right word.
we would
Yep.
have to vote on all of that to change things. And half of the time, I was say, I didn't understand what they were talking about. You know what I mean? Because we weren't that deep into the accounting piece.
From the school committee.
Yeah, sometimes
Yeah.
you would look at what you're, you know,
Yeah.
and the director of finance would say, well, I did this and I shouldn't have done that, and they said it belongs here, Mass General Law or whatever, you know, and so those changes would have to be made. But I guess the whole point here is that fiscal year has not been audited yet. It will be audited, and it's an independent audit, and then there will be findings, which is probably what the new director of finance is going to have to deal with.
Sure. Well, we're talking about two different kinds of audit.
I know the kinds you're talking about.
Yeah.
I understand what forensic audit
And
is,
of course, you have to have the other.
that one is mandatory.
Thanks to Kristen, I got a copy of the fiscal '23 audit letter for the district, which is part of why I was able to ask some questions about
Yeah.
the fiscal '24 and '25 budgets, because I had that audit letter.
So
But-
there is a first step, and there is an audit.
Yeah.
And in speaking with our auditors, if you really, unless you have something that's a real red flag on a fraudulent level, you don't go down the forensic audit route, because it can be up to $50,000 to do. So, like you said, take the first step. If the auditors find anything that doesn't pass the smell test or the sniff test, and you go, okay. And usually the auditors can make that recommendation because they're going to be in there in your files, and if they see stuff that they're not comfortable with, that would be your next step that you
And I
would go to.
believe they would go to DESI, the
Yeah.
auditors would go to DESI and say,
Well,
there's a problem here.
Something I found concerning, and I hope that I heard it correctly, because I was not at the actual meeting, but I did watch the replay of it. And I think I heard this correctly, correct me if I didn't, that the reason those bills weren't paid is that they were going into somebody's email that was no longer an employee.
I think I heard that was part of the problem.
That
at
was
least.
really concerning to me, like, somebody that's not in, that email still exists.
Yeah, it
And
it wasn't
nobody
quite
put
clear
a
to me
forwarding
because-
on it,
So
or
that's
a-
that's an IT issue. That
Yeah, I
email
mean, that's
account
like
should
an
have been
IT and
forwarded.
security issue right there.
Yeah,
I
so-
mean, I haven't worked in the corporate world for a while now, but I know, like, you know, you give your 2 weeks notice, and the day you're out that door, that email address
shut
like,
it down.
doesn't
Yeah.
exist.
Mhm.
It gets forwarded somewhere.
It's true.
Well,
There,
Or you get a
things-
message that
They
says this
also-
person no
I
longer
guess-
works here.
sometimes they just go to a black hole. That's not uncommon either,
Okay.
right? So, but I think if the position is such that there's gonna be that kind of, you know, if you were an accounts payable or receivable, I think your email wouldn't go to a black hole.
Right.
It would be,
Right.
it
Correct.
would be
It's-
transferred to somebody else who's an employee sitting there.
Right.
Well,
Uh,
it depends. If you don't have a new accounts payable person, it wouldn't.
And
It
if
would
you-
just sit there, cause I know we've got a couple of email accounts here that aren't forwarded to somebody. And the newer person never went back to look at the old stuff. Because we've had a couple of bills go missing that way also, that it went to an
Yeah.
old email that didn't exist anymore.
Mm.
And there was, my impression is that there was so much chaos going on. Errors like that could happen relatively easily. I mean, they were changing personnel like monthly.
I think you had 4 people leave at the same time, if that's right.
As I understand it, there was nobody left in the business office
Yep.
in May.
For a period of time, so,
Yes.
I mean, could it easily be done? Yeah, it could be overlooked as
Okay.
much as you would like to say it would never happen, it could,
With that much,
until you
with
know
that much
to look for
chaos,
something.
Yeah.
chances are it would happen.
It shouldn't, though, you're right,
Right.
but
Yeah, that was just, I mean,
But
I
there
don't
may
know
not
about
be
you
a
guys,
way-
but I get
Yeah.
like weekly things in the mail about, you know, different things being hacked and information shared that shouldn't have been shared, and it was like, can those previous employees still then
They may have shut it
somehow
down, cause there is a way to
access
shut
those
down
emails?
access.
there is, even though
Very
the email
quickly.
exists still, like,
Yeah,
we.
but the person can't get into it.
Right,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
we lock things down, or all we do is send an email to the IT people, and they will
Well,
But they don't shut the email down per
I-
se.
I would hope the entire IT system at the school district would be behind some kind of security wall, VPN, some kind of security wall, so.
Well, usually they
So-
have to change the password, because if you don't change the password and the person has that email on their phone, say, then they could still get into it. So typically, everything gets changed when somebody leaves.
Yeah, there's a punch list that you go through when somebody
Mhm.
departs, yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
So maybe the school's got a funky, I don't know, but.
Yeah, who knows
And-
exactly what happened
And I
there.
think they did kind of sum it up, you know, they said something on the, you know, kind of in the way of, yes, errors and mistakes were made, but it was largely due in part to not the right people in the right positions at the right time. And
Mhm.
I mean, unfortunately, I think that does kind of put it all kind of into a very good description of kind of what happened.
I would echo that that's true.
Yeah, it's kind of the big exclamation point of what we went through this past year of, you know, if people had any doubt, which I think pretty much any doubt went away after the Maytown meeting and then all the questions that went to the schools, that people weren't asking the questions and they were avoiding the, you know, answers to us. And I would have never expected it to have accumulated to this point, but it is just another, they say, another exclamation point to what we were asking for, and
it was
that
real.
there was problem even beyond what we thought.
Well, I'm not surprised there were problems, I'm surprised at how bad they were.
Well, exactly, beyond what we thought.
Because
Right.
they got beyond what we thought, exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, the good thing is, I mean, we have people in there that are now really digging into it, and you know, hopefully we will. Well, and not hopefully, we will get answers over time here. And I think the one thing would be good. My request to Kristen would be to, you know, reach out to Boylston to hear their concerns or comments on it. I don't know when they're going to discuss or present to Boylston, but they indicated they were going to be also with them. But I would just be interested to see,
Yeah.
you know, that we have the communication at our level going still on the Boylston side, because they're as vested in this as we are.
So Kristen, the communication line set up between you and the superintendent, that doesn't apply to a FinCom to FinCom, does it?
I wouldn't think so. And that actually,
Just
I
to
meant
be
to
clear.
address, because I'm
Just
sorry,
to be
you sent
clear.
me an email and I didn't have a chance to respond to it yet.
Oh, okay.
I look at administration to administration,
Okay.
board to board. I think though within the town, for the budget, administration to administration is going to work. That's really how the interim superintendent wants it, and I support him
Exactly.
in that. But you know, if the chair wanted, you know, the Berlin FinCom wanted to reach out to the chair of the Boylston FinCom, all I would ask is if you just send an email and loop us all in, you know, on that. I don't see an issue with that.
Well, I didn't see anything there. I mean, any change. I mean, we've always been going. You've been leading to the, well, school committee and the administration. So we've only ever gone where it's like, I even sending emails is when you're not getting answers even back from that. Right? So that's been always the protocol. There's nothing changed here. It's like that communication was only when this piece that you're talking about, you know, continuing to do what we're doing before anyways, if that completely breaks down, which is what happened,
Exactly.
then there will be have to be other alternatives.
Thank you, because you're
Because-
typically, anything I send out, you'd be copied on, right?
Well,
And
but
so
Kristen's
I
all-
was surprised at that sort of comment coming up, because I kind of think it was happening on our end that you were part of these communications.
I
kinda
got
didn't
left out
understand
of a few conversations, and it's not to point fingers or blame, but what was happening sometimes was I was finding out, you know, that I think a lot of it was the school committee reaching out to individuals. I don't think that it was the FinCom doing it or the select board doing it, but then they would have like one conversation here and then a different conversation with a school committee member and somebody else here. And so it was sort of like, I want to make sure we have a unified message, you know, and I think it descended into a bit of chaos because everybody was so panicked about trying to find a solution. And I think part of that was a rookie mistake on my part. I should have spoken up more on those times when I felt like I was out of the loop. But I sort of felt like it got away from all of us at one point.
Sure.
And it just, and I think, when you have now a strong leadership from the administration on the school side that wants to support that, and I have that backing, and he's saying to me, I'm telling the school committee that those communications are going to go through me, then we can have that communication. But it wasn't that way last
No.
year.
I think it's really clear. I think it's really clear. We're not going to be talking to the school committee. You're not going to be talking to the school committee.
No.
Nobody's going to be talking to the school committee except the superintendent.
Correct.
And that's the way it needs to be. And the superintendent will work through you.
Yes.
I think that's really clear. There were way too many voices last year, which is what made it even worse than it was.
And not in a negative way, and not in a way to try. Everybody was trying to resolve it.
Yes.
But I do feel like sometimes part of my job is like the herding cats piece of it, and all of a sudden it became like herding like herds of cats, and I went, oh God, I can't, obviously I can't control the school committee. And so, I think part of the conversation I had with Al and Dan when we sat down was I think sometimes people think this is rude, and I don't mean in a rude way, but keeping people in their lanes and making sure that people
That's it.
understand their role.
That's it.
And as Al said, the school committee has 3 jobs. They hire the superintendent, they do policy, and they do the budget. And just keeping people where they should.
I used to say that at every school committee meeting to the school committee, because school committee members would tend to want to go off the ranch, and as chair, I'd have to lecture them. You have 3 jobs and 3 jobs only.
Right.
Don't bring anything to this table that's not from those 3 arenas. Before there was a town administrator, which is
It was
my
different.
experience.
Yeah.
The director of finance and the superintendent met with the chair of the finance committee.
Right.
They offered the school committee chair to come as a courtesy.
Mm.
It was not expected that you went.
Got it.
So it was the superintendent and the director of finance who met with the finance committee, or the finance committee chair, whatever that configuration was. I was chair for 3 years. I went once because it was something they were concerned about, and they said, it would be good for you to hear this, so why don't you come? So there weren't a lot of voices, there weren't a lot of competing interests going on,
Right.
which I think helped to smooth the process.
So Cliff, I don't want to by any means challenge your knowledge and experience on the school committee, but the words in the law actually say school committee reviews and approves the budget.
Oh,
And so the development of the budget is why your experience was you didn't, as a school committee chair, you weren't in making the sausage. It was the review and the approval.
No
Do I
school
have-
district
Yeah,
budget is developed by a school committee.
thank you. There you go.
Except for last
That's-
Because they do not have the knowledge base.
Yeah, Yeah.
I had the knowledge base because I've been an administrator for 20 years.
yeah.
But I didn't build the budget.
Right.
It was presented to us, we reviewed it, we asked questions, was it meeting priorities? What were the problems, what were the strengths? Kind of like what the finance committee does with the town budget. We would like, okay, this is how it is. And then we voted on it. We didn't say we want $22,000 in this line item. No, that wasn't appropriate.
Well, pre-town administrator, we actually had to do the hard lifting. And I'm really
Exactly.
happy that we don't do it in FinCom. So, yeah. And Kristen, also on this line of communication thing, I'm curious whether some of this is self-reflection, some came from DESI. Obviously Superintendent Gannon has an opinion on it, which is, and nobody's arguing.
Yeah.
From my perspective, we're not arguing about it.
It's
But where did it come from?
it's a combination of my conversations with Desi, my conversations with the superintendent, and self-reflection on how do we not do last year again, because I don't know about you all, but I can't go through that again. And so I really sat down, and what initially prompted it was the call with Desi, and I really sat back and kind of soaked in everything they told me, and I went, okay, so how do we go about this differently? And I think what happened was, because of the chaos, we reverted a little bit to a pre-town administrator era, which I totally get. And I am not trying to make the decisions. I think we just need to act as a board, and the FinCom needs to put a decision forward or an issue forward, and all I'm doing is being the messenger. And you can shoot me if you want. I'm totally okay with that.
no.
So I'm just carrying or as Peg called me, the cruise director. I'm literally just carrying forward what I kind of like cruise director. What what the message is from the group as a whole. And there may not always be consensus amongst the group, right? Like we just had a select board meeting the other night where there wasn't consensus amongst the select board, and yes, one member may have really wanted something, but two said no, and we have to remember we act as a board. And so it was really just sort of a reminder on the ground rules, and just kind of pressing that reset button for all of us. And I think sometimes for me, I'm new at this too. I mean, I have a lot of experience on the work side of things, but sometimes I think I can be a little bit stronger on the leadership side of things. So it was for me doing a little more self-reflecting and saying, how can I lead, by example, and how can I be a better participant? And I feel like I sort of shrunk back a little bit during the process last year, and that's my fault. That's not anybody else's fault.
But I don't think there's any fault to be accrued to anyone. I think people were doing their best.
We were doing the best, but
Doing
I
their
think
best.
I'm looking at what I can do better. How's that?
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
that's all it is.
absolutely. I'm really personally thrilled with the communication piece, where you'll communicate directly with the administration of the school district, and because that will be a solid voice that they will hear and that they will trust.
Well, in building that trust is huge, and I have to say, I had a really great working relationship with Carol and Nancy, but there was sort of an out of lane thing going on with the school committee. Let's be honest. So that breaks that down, right?
Yeah, you couldn't achieve.
I
You
cou-
couldn't
I-
achieve it under those circumstances.
Their hands were tied. We
Absolutely.
couldn't do anything, and that's where that challenge came in. But I have to say, Al called me today, and he goes, I don't want to take more than a minute of your time. I want you to know I thought the meeting the other night was great. It was very productive. The tone was positive. I feel like we set things off on a new direction, and he said the school committee was really pleased with the tone of the meeting as well. And I went, great. Let's all keep going. And I really feel like not only are these folks people I can work with, but these are also folks I can learn from, right? I'm 2 years into being a town administrator. I don't know everything, so
No.
these are seasoned professionals, like I said the other night. I mean, they've been doing this combined, the two of them, for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have 1 decade, but they have 5. So, there's a lot I can learn.
Well, yeah, it's definitely positive because of seeing the superintendent and finance person taking the lead on, because that's always been what I've known. Even when I was finance committee, I had to contact all the department heads, right? And that was contacting, Assabet and of course the superintendent.
Oh, yeah.
And that type of stuff. And of course it was fun when you had Dennis Bartlett didn't use email at all. You had to, had to get his personal phone number to get him to come in for
Memory.
for meetings. But yeah, it was great. Because you've always taken that particular lead, and also, it was very clear. It's like the past administration seemed to be walking on eggshells around the school committee, and so clearly somebody has demonstrated they're the boss,
Right.
Yep.
and they're leading this, and that's how I've always known how it's been done.
Right.
And so that is very positive, and I don't expect any, to have to make any changes there.
No, I think that there's that strong leadership, and you have to have a partnership on both sides, right? And you have to have the support from your respective boards and committees. And I just feel a change is in the wind. I really do. So I'm excited. I really, the past is the past. We've got to give these folks a chance to come in and do what they do best. There's a reason that they do the interim gig. A lot of times they're coming in and they're fixing things and setting it up for the next folks that come in.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've got to be optimistic, right? What else can I do?
Yeah.
But I honestly am impressed as well from what I've seen so far, from the tone that's been set, from the level of respect that's been set, from the you're a professional, I'm a professional, let's get together, let's figure this out, let's make sure our communication is consistent. If you're concerned about something, I don't want to hear it from somebody else, I want to hear it from you. And I appreciate that, and that goes both ways. I don't want to have a roundabout somebody on the soccer field, they don't get along, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, if there's a problem, we deal with it directly before it becomes a huge thing.
Yep.
So I have a question, being kind of the new kid on the block here. During the budget process, so I have the calendar, and the different committees are, so do the different committees and departments appear before us, or do they submit like paperwork?
So both. They will submit, so the first thing that happens is on November 29th, June will receive all of the paperwork. June will review it for completeness and accuracy, and then she sends it to me. And at that point, once we have it complete, it gets scanned and uploaded onto that Google Drive. So you guys will have full access to all of it. And then starting, with December 11th, the schools will come, and then here, and then in January, after we get through the holidays, the rest of those departments will come. And also, I have to figure out how to fit the historical commission in, because they want to come before you guys as well, just as an aside. But
Now, when it comes to the schools, who, is it school committee that comes, or is it the superintendent or finance director that
so
typically
I'll tell you
comes?
ASABIC, because it's been the same every year. The superintendent comes, and occasionally Lynn Ryan will come, because she's a local member of
Yep.
the school committee, but she sits in the audience and, she just listens in. My first year, it was just the BBRSD superintendent that presented the budget. Last year, it was the school committee. I would be shocked if it was anyone other than the superintendent this year.
Yeah, usually it's always been either the finance person or the superintendent, or a combination of the both.
My experience is both, except for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Last 2 years
It's
were
usually
an
both.
apparition, total apparition.
Right, and a school committee member or two would typically show up also.
In the
but they would,
in the
yes, they would
audience.
not be the lead
Okay.
of any of it.
And
But-
the newer
but
ones,
la-
usually they'll bring some sort of presentation to,
Okay. But last year, that's not how it worked. It was actually the school committee that presented.
They didn't
No,
present.
They didn't.
we didn't
Well-
see.
Well, in
anybody.
December, Megan did
That's-
give us
Yes,
the
it
list.
was
Yeah.
Megan
Remember
and Julie that were doing, Megan
in
was doing
December,
most of the talking.
we got the above-level services budget from
I thought
Megan.
that was Nancy and Carol. Was Megan there?
They were all there, Nancy,
Yeah.
all
Yeah,
four
were all
of them
three
were
there?
there.
I think so.
Carol was there, Nancy was there, Julie was there, and Megan
Thank
was
you.
there.
Oh, okay.
I remember
The
that.
first.
I thought the school committee did most
And
of the
Nancy
talking.
was shuffling pieces of paper.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I remember that meeting well.
This is my PTSD. Apparently, I can't remember how things happen.
It's
You
okay.
blocked it
Sorry,
out.
I really. I'm like, it's just not going to happen that way again.
It's called self-care.
At some point, it was like I took some time off this summer because I needed it.
Yeah, I remember that session, and the coming out of it was, could we look at a level of services numbers? And
they're like,
that
no.
was, no, we couldn't, we're not allowed to do that. so
Nope. Yeah.
we're not allowed to do that.
It was a $1.1 million of above-level services requests and additional positions.
Yeah.
How you-
That I remember.
If you decide you want hard copies, let me know, cause I can always make you copies and leave it for you somewhere here.
Oh,
If
for the
you-
no, I'm fine with it being
Versus-
scanned.
okay.
Thank you. And if
Okay.
I think I need a copy, I'll just
Okay.
print it off myself.
Cause way back when
But
we
thank
used to
you.
all get copies.
Yes,
No,
back,
No,
Yeah.
save the
back in the
trees.
day.
Save
Yeah,
the
we're doing
trees.
pretty well with it. Yeah, just.
I don't want the town's budget to go
Right.
up because I need a stack of papers.
You can always borrow mine if you want.
I have to say, I'm used to doing budget binders, so, this is great. To not have to spend hours upon hours also of administrative, and take Dee away from everything she's doing to do full budget binders. But obviously, if there's specific things, like I printed out, like,
Do you do it?
you think I'm putting together binders? Peg will yell at me. Oh, you used to have to do that?
Not
Oh,
binders,
okay.
though.
Peg's always like, you can't do that. She tells me all the time. She won't let me update the website. I'm
Yeah,
sad.
we would just have the printouts and we would just lay them out and we would
Yep.
just put them
Oh.
into our piles and everybody did their own thing,
Had
so.
to
Wow.
update them as it went along, yeah.
See, I'm literally, so I did for 8 years before I came here. I started as, an assistant to the town administrator and then an assistant town administrator. And what we did literally every year was make 20 binders for the FinCom, the Select Board, and the school committee. And it was days long process of like, don't touch anything in the office because everything is in order, and it's like 75 pages and you're not going to mess anything up. You know, it was one of those situations. So, and then everyone just throws them away.
I know.
So, yeah, but I print out like the police and fire budgets because there's so much detail that I need to actually like write on it, or like when Fred does his
I actually have to
breakdown of
revert back to it,
expenses.
yeah.
Yeah,
When I
so
set
there's
up the
certain
budget.
things I still print out because I need to like work on it. So there, I think your point is if there's anything like that, you know,
Yeah.
that you guys
By all
want,
means,
just let
just
us
ask if you
know.
need us to do it.
I thought it worked well last year, and it was my first year to have it on Google Drive, once I mastered Google Drive.
Yeah, it makes it definitely helps.
Good.
Okay, I think we're all set, so, motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye?
Aye.